When Jamal went down on one knee, when the room went quiet, when every phone camera lifted at the same time, Veronica smiled and said the word everyone was waiting for. Yes. For a moment, it felt like the end of a long story. Like closure, like proof that love had finally won. But what most people didn't realize then was this simple truth, that yes was not the ending. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. This is not just a story about a proposal. It's not just about a relationship. It's about pressure, timing, fear, public eyes, and the slow realization that wanting something is not the same as being ready for it. This is the story of Veronica and Jamal, and how a single word changed everything. Before the cameras, before the comments, before the speculation and the backlash, there was history. Veronica had already lived a version of love most people never recover from. She was a single mother, a woman who had built her life through responsibility, routine, and resilience. Love for her was no longer a fairy tale. It was something measured carefully, weighed against stability, her child's future, and her own peace. She had learned how fast things could fall apart. Jamal was different. At least, that's how it felt at first. He was younger, confident, energetic, emotional in a way that felt refreshing. He talked openly about feelings, about commitment, about wanting a future that wasn't half-lived. Where Veronica was cautious, Jamal was bold. Where she hesitated, he leaned in. That contrast became their chemistry. People noticed it early. Friends, family, viewers. The way Jamal looked at Veronica wasn't subtle. He didn't hide his affection. He didn't play games. He spoke about her like someone who already believed she was the one. And Veronica slowly allowed herself to believe it too. But belief is fragile when you've been hurt before. From the outside, their relationship looked exciting, fun, different. But inside, it moved fast. Faster than Veronica was used to. Faster than she was prepared for emotionally. Jamal wanted progression. He talked about marriage early, openly, without hesitation. To him, love meant action. Commitment wasn't scary. It was proof. To Veronica, commitment meant permanence, and permanence meant consequences. She didn't just think about herself. She thought about her child, her past, her failures, her fears. Every step forward came with a quiet voice asking, "What if this ends badly too?" Still, she stayed. Because Jamal made her feel seen. Because he made her laugh. Because for once someone was choosing her loudly. The proposal wasn't a surprise to everyone. The signs were there. Jamal had been talking about rings, about next steps, about making things official in a way that couldn't be undone. Friends hinted. Cameras lingered. Conversations grew heavier. Veronica felt the pressure building long before the moment arrived. But pressure doesn't always feel like force. Sometimes it feels like expectation, like the world is already moving forward without waiting for your doubts to catch up. When the day came, everything was set. The location, the timing, the audience. And Jamal looked sure. That kind of certainty is powerful, especially when you're unsure. So when he asked the question, Veronica didn't pause. She smiled. She said yes. And the room exploded with applause. That yes echoed everywhere. Online, people celebrated. Fans cheered. Comments poured in calling it perfect, meant to be, finally. Jamal looked like a man who had just won something he'd always wanted. Veronica looked happy too. But happiness can be complicated. Behind that smile was a rush of emotion, relief, excitement, fear, doubt, all colliding at once. Saying yes felt right in the moment. It felt easier than explaining uncertainty, easier than disappointing someone she cared about deeply. Sometimes yes is a shield. Sometimes it's a way to buy time. And time was exactly what Veronica needed. After the celebration faded, reality crept in quietly. Conversations changed. Expectations grew heavier. The future stopped being theoretical and became specific. Wedding talk, living arrangements, responsibilities. That's when the question started. Could she do this again? Was love enough this time? Was she choosing Jamal or choosing what everyone expected? Jamal, meanwhile, felt secure. In his mind, the hardest part was done. She had said yes. That meant commitment. That meant certainty. He didn't see the hesitation growing beneath the surface. Not yet. What made things harder was the public nature of everything. Every moment was analyzed. Every expression dissected. Every interaction judged. People didn't just watch their love story, they participated in it. That kind of attention doesn't just amplify happiness, it amplifies doubt too. Veronica began to feel trapped between her truth and her image. Backing out felt impossible. Questioning felt selfish. Silence felt safer. So she stayed quiet. And quiet doesn't stop thoughts. It lets them grow louder. Nam, this is where the story really begins. Not with the proposal, not with the ring, but with the space between what was said and what was felt. Because saying yes is easy, living with it is not. And soon Veronica would realize something that changed everything. Love doesn't fail loudly, it fails slowly. In moments no one sees dot. The ring didn't change anything overnight. That surprised Veronica. She thought saying yes would bring clarity, that it would calm the noise in her head. That commitment would feel solid, grounding, final. Instead, it made everything louder. In the days after the proposal, people treated them differently. Conversations shifted from, "Are you too serious?" to, "So when's the wedding?" There was no transition period, no space to breathe. The future arrived all at once, fully formed, demanding answers. Jamal leaned into it. He talked openly about plans, about timelines, about building something permanent. His excitement wasn't performative. It was real. He had been ready for this long before the ring appeared. For him, the proposal was a promise fulfilled. For Veronica, it was a promise still being processed. At first, she tried to match his energy. She smiled during conversations about venues. She nodded when people joked about dates and dresses. She laughed off questions she wasn't ready to answer. Outwardly, everything looked perfect, but inside, something felt off. Not wrong, not broken, just heavy. She noticed it in quiet moments, late at night, early mornings, when Jamal was asleep and her thoughts weren't. The ring felt symbolic, but it also felt like a deadline, a marker saying, now you have to be sure. And she wasn't. Jamal didn't notice right away. Why would he? Veronica wasn't pulling away. She wasn't cold. She still showed affection, still cared, still tried. But care isn't the same as certainty. When Jamal talked about the future, Veronica responded carefully. She chose neutral words. She avoided specifics. She said things like, "We'll see," and "let's take it one step at a time." To her, that was honesty. To Jamal, it sounded like hesitation he didn't fully understand. He had believed the ring settled everything. There's a moment in many relationships where the story changes tone. It's subtle. No, no fight, no dramatic scene, but just a shift. For Veronica and Jamal, that shift came when excitement turned into expectation. Being engaged wasn't just romantic. It was logistical, emotional, psychological. Veronica began to feel like she was auditioning for a life she hadn't agreed to fully yet. Every decision felt permanent. Every discussion felt loaded. She started asking herself questions she had avoided before. Was she in love with Jamal as he was now, or with the version of him she hoped would grow with her? Was she choosing him because she wanted to, or because saying no felt cruel? Was she ready to merge lives, families, futures? These weren't doubts she could share easily, especially not publicly. Jamal, on the other hand, felt like he was finally standing on solid ground. He had made his intentions clear. He had committed. He had been chosen. From his perspective, the relationship was moving forward exactly as it should. So when Veronica grew quieter, he didn't panic. He assumed she just needed time. Adjusting, processing. He trusted the yes. Trust can be dangerous when it blinds you to what's changing. The public reaction didn't help. Fans celebrated the engagement endlessly. Clips replayed. Headlines framed it as a happy ending. People projected their own hopes into the relationship. Nonetheless, every positive comment made Veronica feel more trapped. Oh, because how do you explain uncertainty when everyone is already celebrating certainty? How do you admit fear when the world has already decided you're happy? She began to feel like she was carrying two versions of herself. The woman everyone saw, smiling with a ring, and the woman inside, quietly wondering if she had moved too fast. There were moments she almost spoke up, late conversations that hovered on the edge of honesty, pauses where she could have said, "I'm scared," times she could have asked for more space. But Jamal looked so sure, so proud, so invested, and Veronica didn't want to be the one who took that away. So she stayed silent. Silence, however, is not neutral. It's a choice. And every day she didn't speak, the weight grew heavier. The relationship began to change in small ways. Not arguments, not distance, just tension. Conversations became careful. Jokes didn't land the same. Moments that should have felt exciting felt pressured instead. Jamal sensed something was different, but he couldn't name it. He reassured himself with the ring, with the promise, with the belief that love was enough. Veronica reassured herself by pretending everything was fine. Both were wrong. This is the dangerous space between love and truth, where no one is lying, but no one is fully honest either. And it's in this space that doubt doesn't fade. It sharpens, Soon, Veronica would reach a point where silence was no longer an option. And Jamal would realize that a yes does not always mean forever. Doubt rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with a warning or a dramatic moment. It settles in quietly, hiding behind reasonable thoughts and small concerns. For Veronica, doubt didn't feel like panic. It felt like responsibility. It felt like asking the hard questions no one wanted to hear. The engagement had shifted something fundamental. Before, uncertainty could be excused as getting to know each other. Now, uncertainty felt dangerous. It felt like time running out. At doubt, and Veronica felt it every day. The first real crack appeared in conversations about everyday life. Not love, not feelings, but logistics. Where would they live? How would their routines merge? What would parenting look like? What role would Jamal play in her child's life? These weren't abstract ideas to Veronica. They were serious decisions with real consequences. To Jamal, these conversations felt like steps forward. He spoke optimistically. He imagined solutions quickly. He believed everything could be figured out as long as they were together. Veronica didn't move that way. She needed certainty before action. He believed action created certainty. That difference began to matter more than either of them expected. When Veronica hesitated, Jamal tried to reassure her. He reminded her of how much he cared, how committed he was, how he wouldn't walk away. He spoke from the heart, hoping his confidence would ease her fear. But reassurance only works when it addresses the real fear. Veronica wasn't afraid of Jamal leaving. She was afraid of choosing wrong. No amount of promises could erase that. There were moments when frustration slipped through. Not anger, just confusion. Jamal would ask why she seemed distant. Veronica would say she was tired. He would talk about the future. She would respond with silence or soft deflection. Neither of them wanted conflict. But avoiding conflict doesn't stop it. It just pushes it underground. The pressure of public attention made everything worse. Every appearance felt like a performance. Every smile felt rehearsed. Veronica began to feel disconnected from the version of herself people saw. She wasn't unhappy, but she wasn't settled either. And being in between felt unbearable. Jamal, meanwhile, started to sense that something wasn't aligning. He noticed the lack of enthusiasm in conversations that should have been exciting. He noticed how Veronica avoided details. For the first time, he questioned the yes. But questioning it felt dangerous. If he acknowledged doubt, it made it real. So he didn't. There's a moment in relationships where both people feel something is wrong, but neither wants to say it first. That's where Veronica and Jamal found themselves. She didn't want to hurt him. He didn't want to push her. So they circled around the truth, never touching it. Veronica's internal struggle intensified. She replayed the proposal in her mind, not with regret, but with analysis. She asked herself whether she had said yes out of love or out of pressure, whether she had wanted the moment more than the commitment. She didn't doubt Jamal's feelings. She doubted her readiness. And that distinction mattered. Small disagreements began to surface. Nothing dramatic, just misunderstandings, different expectations, conversations that ended unresolved. Each one added to the quiet tension. Veronica began to withdraw emotionally, not because she cared less, but because she was overwhelmed. Jamal interpreted the withdrawal as distance. Distance made him anxious. Anxiety made him push, and pushing made Veronica pull back further. It was a cycle neither of them named. The cracks were invisible to the outside world. To everyone else, they were still the engaged couple, still smiling, still together. But inside, something was shifting. Veronica started to imagine what it would feel like to say no, to admit she wasn't ready, to step back. The thought terrified her. Not because she didn't care about Jamal, but because she knew what it would mean. Disappointment, backlash, judgment, and heartbreak. Jamal, sensing the emotional distance, began to double down on commitment. He talked more about the future. He emphasized stability. He reminded her of their plans. In his mind, closeness would fix the distance. But closeness without understanding only magnifies pressure. Veronica felt like she was being pulled forward while her feet were planted in doubt. And eventually, something had to give. The turning point didn't come from a fight. It came from exhaustion, from carrying uncertainty alone for too long, from realizing that silence was becoming a form of dishonesty. Veronica knew she couldn't continue like this. Soon she would have to say the words she had been avoiding. Words that would change everything. The decision didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. A quiet moment here. A sleepless night there. A conversation replayed one too many times in her head. Veronica didn't wake up one morning and decide to walk away. What happened was slower, heavier, and far more painful. She realized she couldn't move forward pretending anymore. The moment of clarity came not during an argument, but during silence. Jamal was talking about the future again, about plans that felt settled to him, about steps that assumed certainty. Veronica listened, nodding, but her body felt disconnected from the words. She noticed it clearly then. She wasn't leaning in. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't excited. She was enduring. And that scared her more than anything else. Love should not feel like endurance. For the first time, Veronica allowed herself to say the truth in her own head. She wasn't ready. Not for marriage. Not for the level of commitment Jamal wanted. Not for the permanence that came with it. Saying yes had been emotional. Staying engaged would require honesty. And honesty meant hurting someone she cared about. The conversation she had been avoiding finally happened. There was no audience, no cameras, no dramatic buildup. Just two people sitting with a truth that could no longer be ignored. Veronica spoke slowly, carefully, choosing her words like fragile glass. She talked about fear, about pressure, about feeling rushed, about needing space she didn't know how to ask for before. She didn't accuse. She didn't blame. She explained. And then she said the words that changed everything. She wasn't sure she could move forward. Jamal didn't react right away. At first there was confusion, then disbelief, then a silence heavier than any argument could have been. In his mind, they had already crossed the hardest line. She had said yes. That meant commitment. That meant trust. He asked questions, tried to understand, tried to fix what he thought was a temporary fear. But Veronica wasn't asking for reassurance. She was asking for release. This is the hardest part of love that no one talks about. When two people care deeply, but want different things at different speeds. Veronica wasn't rejecting Jamal as a person. She was rejecting a future she didn't feel ready to promise. Jamal struggled to separate the two. To him, the hesitation felt personal, like a withdrawal of love, like a reversal of a promise. And in a way it was. Changing her mind didn't bring relief the way Veronica expected. It brought grief. Grief for the relationship they could have had, for the happiness people believed in, for the version of herself who wanted to be ready. She cried not because she was leaving, but because she knew she was hurting someone who didn't deserve pain. Jamal felt blindsided. He had believed they were building something solid. Now it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. He asked what had changed. Veronica didn't have a simple answer. Nothing changed. That was the problem. The aftermath was quiet. No explosive breakup, no dramatic exit. Just distance. Conversations became shorter. Emotions became guarded. The future they had talked about suddenly became a subject neither of them could touch. Publicly, nothing was announced yet. Privately, everything had shifted. Veronica had stepped back. Jamal was left standing where he thought they both were. The hardest realization for Jamal came slowly. Love alone wasn't enough. Not when timing is off. Not when readiness doesn't match. Not when one person is still searching for certainty. He had done everything right in his own mind. He had committed. He had been honest. He had loved openly. And still, it wasn't enough to hold her there. Veronica knew the decision would follow her. People would judge. People would speculate. People would simplify something deeply complex. But she also knew staying would have been readiness. Tension. Veronica began to withdraw emotionally, not because she cared less, but because she was overwhelmed. Jamal interpreted the withdrawal as distance. Distance made him anxious. Anxiety made him push, and imagine what it would feel